to you from Studio HQ, you're tuning into Thinking the Extra, coming to you from Comic Crusaders. I am Dodgy in the mix, mixing it with my amazing guests. But before we dive in, let's talk about our sponsors. Are you an aspiring comic creator but don't have the tools? Look no further than Thermond Comic Creations. There are sessions for different ages and different levels of experience. If location is an issue, that is not an issue, as classes can be held digitally via Zoom. Jump on to thermondcomiccreations.com. And October 1st is the Buying the Comics Day. If you're a creator like our guest here today, reach out to your local comic book store, make it an event, celebrate local creators. It's basically Artist Alley in your local comic book store. Well, our guest today is Bradley Adan, an up-and-coming creator. Apologies for that little sound there. So, Bradley, tell us a bit about yourself. I hear that you're based out in Albury. When did you discover comics?
Yeah, look, I kind of discovered comics a bit later than most, usually in the industry. I was more into like cartoons and anime at the time, and got really impatient for the next episodes and stuff to come out. So I ended up just jumping into the source material. So it was probably around 16, I think, was the first time I went out and bought a big, like, a comic myself with my own money. And I think that was actually a One Piece volume.
What volume was that?
Number one.
Oh, okay, good. You didn't really like jump into issue number 350.
No.
Because that's very daunting. But what TV shows were you into? You mentioned that you're into cartoons and
like earlier stuff would have been like Gargoyles, The Mighty Ducks,
nice.
Young Justice?
Yes, Young Justice.
Yeah, no, not Young Justice. The one with the other one with the focuses on Robin.
Teen Titans.
Teen Titans, that's the one.
Titans, yeah.
But the original, not the Teen
Titans. No, not the TV version. Yes.
Was really into those, as well as like Naruto, Bleach, Dragon Ball Z. Those were really big impacts on my creative style as well. Like your Dragon Ball Z's and your Yu-Gi-Ohs. Got really into the anime fandom.
Yeah, you can kind of see that in the art style that you have in your book, which is coming out as a Kickstarter. So where did where did the drive come from when you actually decided that you're going to make the leap to jump into a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign?
Oh wow, Kickstarter! I thought I knew where the question was going, but I wasn't ready for the Kickstarter campaign. So this is my 5th campaign now. Going back to where it all began, it was very daunting. Building up essentially the presentation for Kickstarter. I'd been doing the comics up until that point all self-funded, and Kickstarter felt like the next logical step to take some financial pressure off myself, and use it as a bit of a pre-order system. So I'd been doing the comic circuit at the conventions for a few years at that point. So it was similar in terms of putting myself out there, but it was daunting in another way because I didn't really know what to expect, and the whole all or nothing side of Kickstarter was also quite daunting itself.
Yes, but in terms of actually the building the story, so where did if we go a few steps back, where did the actual creative, when did you decide, I'm going to make my own comic book?
So that would have been Back when I was wrapping up high school, so
Okay.
back in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
I was in a mate's bedroom that was a garage, so very punk sort of layout going on,
Mm-hmm.
and we were just watching anime, and I had always kind of been using creative writing as an escape tool, um, dealing with some of my chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of came up with a concept on the spot when I was mucking around with a mate and decided to just go all in, because if these people could do what I've been watching, why can't I
Mm-hmm.
at least attempt to make the physical medium version of?
Yeah. And in terms of stories, were these just things that were just sitting in your brain that you decided to make a story? Did you have the story first? Or you have to create like the characters second?
Um, I had the concept and the characters.
Mm-hmm.
The story itself definitely came later.
Okay.
So the main character of Super Ready Battle Armor can essentially bring people back from the dead,
Mm-hmm.
and that is essentially a personification of one of my greatest fears, which is what comes after death.
Yeah, of course.
And having that question so very confrontingly young. Previously, I briefly mentioned the whole chronic illness thing.
Yes.
I was probably about 5 years old and got diagnosed with a cardiovascular problem,
Mm-hmm.
where my entire left ventricle just got completely scarred, so it doesn't work 100%
Yeah.
or even 50%. So that's always been something that kind of plays around in my mind and has since I was quite young. And it was kind of the best what if scenario.
Yeah.
If there was a superhero that could come and save myself and all the other kids that were in the Royal Children's Hospital,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was the best kind of logical step that my brain kind of came to, was uh, an entity that was kind of like a vampire but could redirect that life energy and essentially heal people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, uh, being as young as you were, that's very inspirational to actually come up with an idea. You know, you could be like, well, why me? And sit on that
Oh yeah.
that self pity, which obviously you're entitled to have, but to actually come up with some positive energy to to have this escapism, as you wrote in your small bio, I think that's very inspirational. And can I just mind if I ask you, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling
Oh,
how's your health overall?
health overall. I mean, I'm slowly coming to terms with the fact that I do have a disability, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't do as much as I used to, even uh, prior to 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did have another little heart hiccup, and
Yeah.
it's knocked me around a little bit. But apart from being a bit tired, more than I usually would, I'm not too
Yeah.
bad.
Oh, good to hear. Good to
Yeah,
hear. No,
we're
that's
managing it pretty well.
fantastic. And I'm sure, sitting around and reading comic books isn't the worst thing you can do to,
Exactly.
yeah, to recover. Yes, exactly. No, that's awesome. Um, so tell us a bit about your characters, because one thing I did find about Super Ready Battle Armor is the fact you've got so many complex characters, and they're thrown in our faces. And if you don't mind, just go through and just tell us a little bit about each character,
Yeah.
because man, it was
Well,
amazing. Yeah.
thanks, man. It's really awesome to hear. Um, So my absolute favorite character is actually one that you've chucked up on the screen already. Professor Insanus is
Bit like Doc
just
Brown in some ways.
yeah. It's like if you got Doc Brown and cranked him his insanity level up to 11, that's kind of where he's at.
Yeah.
Doc Brown was actually the inspiration for Professor Insanus. I'm a big
Mhm.
Back to the Future fan, very
Same.
like big on time travel properties, and you can pretty much almost, so long as you have a well thought out time travel story, you've got me.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter what else is going on, so long as the time travel's schmick. Mm.
Absolutely.
So this was a little bit of an homage too, as well as kind of very. Have you heard of the anime Fully Cooley?
No, to be honest, I
No,
haven't.
no, that's all right. It's an early 2000s, essentially an independent project that a
Okay.
studio did. It was really, really short, about 6 episodes, and it is
Mhm.
very zany, wild, wacky, high energy, out of this world concepts. And that was
Mhm.
actually what the anime that I was watching when I first came up with this concept was. And Professor Insanus is an amalgamation of one of the characters from that show and Doc
Yeah.
Brown,
Nice.
with my humor being forefront there.
Yeah.
I obsessed with his eyebrows. I feel that
Mhm.
they are his most prominent feature. Uh, and he's just so much fun to write, honestly. He has
Yeah.
a sophisticated AI robot that he was too focused on building the actual AI that he didn't bother to build a synthetic body for it, and just slapped a Segway mop and bucket together with a receiver on the side of it, and that's Susan, his personal
Yeah.
assistant.
Who's got like the waving hand and
Yeah.
the only link he
uh,
knows.
just them as the core character are just so much enjoyment. I'm
Mm.
really excited about issue 5 because I'm getting to delve into Oracle and Equinox a bit more.
Mhm.
They were briefly shown off in issue 1.
Yeah.
They're a, a duo that work at a coffee shop, but Oracle, much as her namesake, is a seer. So she actually uses bodies of liquid as mediums, as like her version of a crystal ball.
Yeah. Okay. So she could see into that to come up with what the next thing is gonna happen, right?
Yeah. Except I go more sci-fi than fantasy with this,
Mhm.
and it essentially she can. Are you familiar with the many worlds theories?
Somewhat,
It's
yes.
kind of like what they did in Infinity War, where there's like the multiple parallel universes, and essentially what she can do is she can see a multitude of different outcomes in these parallel worlds,
Mhm.
and then use her intellect to piece together the most likely outcome from the information that she has gathered,
Oof.
giving the interpretation that she is able to see the future.
Yeah, no, like nearly literally every character has such a prominent story, and you see that issue by issue. Like sometimes in one, like read issue 1, and then issue 2, there's a different focus on different characters. And later in the issue, then I'm like, oh, okay, I remember this character from issue 1. And but tell us
I
about
am
Infector. I mean, Infector, I thought was probably my favorite character. So,
really,
so unique.
that's super cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's the personification of um everything a hero wants to be.
yeah,
Um, but he's also held back by trauma
Mm-hmm.
and a sense of responsibility to his dead parents and his foster father slash guardian, Professor
Mm-hmm.
Insanus, because there is someone hunting him and his family.
Yeah.
So he's trapped in this duality of wanting to do something good with the abilities that he has, but
Mm-hmm.
not wanting to endanger or um, besmirch what his mother sacrificed so that he could actually live.
Mm-hmm. And so we're talking a little bit about your manga influence. Was there any mainstream comic influence as well you like to share that you really were there any comic book influences?
I would say Spider-Man would probably
Spider
be,
Man.
yeah. I'm admittedly I don't have as much knowledge when it comes to the Western sort of comics, but
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man and even probably The Darkness.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Um,
yes.
yeah.
By Mark
Uh,
Silvestri, yes. Image.
yeah. And couple sporadic sort of Deadpool comics. I never was able to get my hands on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, those are probably the two big comics that would be influences on the series that aren't manga focused.
Yeah.
Um, got into The Darkness via the video game actually
Oh
because and
really? Yes.
loved it so much that I was like, nah, I need more of this world and this concept. And yeah, sunk my teeth into the story of the comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Fun.
So it's interesting. You went from the game to the comic, whereas usually it's the
Yeah,
other way around. In some ways, you might be into the comic and then you see the game. You go, "Oh, I want to play this." Oh,
that's
that's so
right.
interesting.
Yeah. And I guess that comes down to I used to work in not a comic book shop, a EB Games. So
Oh wow.
I had a lot more exposure to the video game side of it, but was more focused over into the manga side than I was the comic. So it was really cool to work backwards.
Yeah,
Like you said,
definitely.
it was definitely. I don't think I've done it since.
No,
um,
yeah, it'd be
oh,
hard
actually,
to
no.
do
Yeah,
that.
I have done
Yes,
well, but Spider Man I'd already been exposed to.
of course.
Um, but after the PS3, no
Mhm,
PS4 Spider-Man that came out, I went back and revisited the Spider-Gwen series as well
mhm.
as the uh, is it the Spider-Verse?
Yes, the Spider Verse. Yes,
Yeah, and the Spider-Verse series as well. Just
nice.
yeah, hungry for more Spider-Man after I finished the game.
Yeah, because I mean, unless there are movies out, you really don't really have a whole lot of options
Yeah.
to delve into these worlds. But I take it you do watch the Marvel movies, right?
Yes. Yeah. I still haven't seen the new Doctor Strange yet, but
Me
apart from
neither.
that, I think I'm caught up. I think.
Ah, awesome. So and then we've got more characters like to touch on.
Yeah.
BA BA is a fun
Ah.
character.
So BA is actually it's fun to see him take center stage again in this
Hmm.
issue. The end of issue 4, we reveal that when people come back from the dead via infector's powers, they don't necessarily come back 100% human.
Ooh.
So BA has started to develop some interesting abilities, and
Mhm.
his DNA is being fundamentally altered.
Okay.
And we found out in the previous issue that he has ties to a ninja clan. So like we got
Really?
that. Yes. So they initially like weren't like your traditional ninja, but then as
Hmm.
they modernize, they've become more like your secret agents, but still utilizing those like same sort of tactics. So like
Hmm.
Japanese James Bond almost. And that
No,
that ties in. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
no. I was just gonna no. Please continue. I was gonna ask something else, but I can wait.
No, I was just gonna say, and that ties in with Agent Eclair, his sister. So
Okay.
she is the James Bond character, I guess, in the comic.
Yeah. One thing I was also going to say, the relationship between BA and Hawk, I really enjoyed.
Yeah,
When they're
I'm
in
really
prison
glad to hear
together,
that.
that was so funny. I actually laughed out loud at that moment.
Yeah.
They're talking like you almost feel like they're actually like in a bar somewhere, and they found out they're in prison. I thought that was a really good twist, and
Thanks,
it worked
man.
really well. But
um,
please continue.
sorry,
Oh, no,
there's like a
you're good.
slight delay. Yeah, no, I did a short 3-page comic for Free Comic Book Day back in 2020,
Okay.
just before the pandemic really hit.
Mm-hmm.
The indie label that I'm a part of, we did I think it was a 12-page comic that
Mm-hmm.
had little side stories for
Like
the
anthology.
yeah, of like, so there was a 3-pager from my Super Ready Battle Armour. uh Kieran had his In Purgatory and the Talking Bread,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like a short little um almost like an ash can.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I brought it up was because it wholly focuses on BA and Hawk and how they actually ended up in prison.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I'll send you that after the show
Oh
to have a look
please.
at. It's just
No.
a little bit of a insight into what exactly they did and
Mm-hmm.
how they ended up in the cell.
Yeah. But in terms of piecing together all these stories, what did you have the script like written out issues 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, or did these come over periods of time? But what was your creative process?
It's a bit interesting. So the this is actually the official release of the a pilot that I did with a previous artist that had 4
Mm-hmm.
issues. So it's mostly a an adaptation. Well, I can technically write it into the whole world line thing, and we can be like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different parallel universe. But it's essentially a reworked version of the pilot,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say maybe 40% of it is reworked material from that, and then the other 60% is built up around that base. But in terms of the actual script laid out, I had the first 2 issues laid out in one go. Um, and had to I really wanted to focus on both BA and Infector in that first chapter, but it was going to be too long.
Yeah.
I had to kind of split it into the 2 and have them meet up in that second part of issue 2. So that was
Mm-hmm.
the biggest one that's been planned out in terms of um, sequential chapters.
Mm-hmm.
At this stage, I have a overarch um what do you call it, plot line,
Mm-hmm.
and certain beats that I want to hit,
Yep.
and a rough sort of end goal at issue 6 for the first act, and then everything else has been issue by issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, when I read it, like it's like your world building is quite impressive because you've got literally like we go back, we've got 8 characters here that have quite an intensive story, and there's a bit of depth to each story as well. So, like, at what point did you decide, oh, maybe I should was this planned ahead that you were going to have it like everyone kind of? I guess the best way I'm trying to ask you is like, how did you separate the stories?
I've noticed that I've taken on a trait from one of my most influential artists, which is
Okay.
Eiichiro Oda, who does One Piece.
Mhm.
And I feel like my biggest flaw when it comes to writing the stories is that I find it hard to tell myself no.
Yeah,
Which, looking at One Piece, scares me because that's 1,000 chapters long.
I know, right?
So I have had to rein myself back quite considerably
Mm-hmm.
after I had it put in perspective how many characters I do have built up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think pretty much what we're seeing at the moment will be the limit,
Yeah.
at least for the foreseeable future. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
while we have seen even ones that aren't on the 8 that you've shown,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them are kind of falling off as being side characters.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Hawk has taken a bit of a backseat at the moment. His partner, Iron, has been kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
The We've got the main villain, Donamic, and then his supporting cast. While I am giving a lot of spotlights to these characters, I honestly I don't know. um, yeah, it's a really interesting question. I've never really thought about it.
No,
Um, it
that's okay.
I think it just happens so naturally for me at this stage
Mm-hmm.
because I have been so immersed in this world. I try actively in each issue to not oversaturate how many characters there are
Mm-hmm.
and try and give those characters that are there as much screen time, well, panel time, and as much of a voice as possible. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
that that's maybe how I managed to juggle the
Yeah.
12 plus characters so far.
No, and look, and one thing I noticed, like you know, you're right. You do try to introduce so many characters at once, but the way that you do it though is like, I almost feel like I'm reading a manga that I could buy in, say, like the bookstores that are imported from Japan and translated to English, because I feel like they're very fluid. Like I see what you're doing. Like I can see that you're heavily influenced by Japanese manga, and for someone who is really not that, my exposure is, I think most of would get from Dragon Ball Z, but I feel like it feels like I'm actually reading a standard manga. So,
Oh,
and,
thanks,
and,
man.
and kudos to you because, again, from an outsider's perspective looking in, I'm seeing what looks to be a natural manga. So, after hearing what you've been explaining to me, I can see why or where this actually came from. But
Yeah.
you mentioned before you're up to issues 1 to 5, and that's going to be available soon through the Kickstarter. Um, from issue 6, will this be the finale where you get to tell this continuing story, or will there be more on the horizon?
There will be more on the horizon. We're just kind
Hmm.
of trying to build that audience at the moment. Um,
Yeah.
that's the main focus. So I
Hmm.
will be taking a small break to do work on a couple of other projects.
Hmm.
But we'll definitely be returning to Super Ready Battle Armour. It's my baby, and I just really enjoy working on
No, fair enough. And you
it.
and just tell us about the artist, because again, the art is very manga influence. Can
Very
you
much
just
so.
yeah, shout out to us who your artist is and how you came to collaborating?
Yeah, so it was a really weird experience for me, because I was basically hiring someone to do what I was presenting as a professional gig. So I went through a website called Upwork, which
Okay.
is basically just a freelancer website similar to Fiverr and uh, Craigslist, I
Yeah,
guess.
or
I,
DVR.
other places that I probably am not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I put up the job posting for issue 1, looking for a manga artist or manga style artist to illustrate this concept, and had the script there, and um, had the pilots and other character references, and it basically shortlisted down to, I think I had 4 artists that I was
Mm-hmm.
happy with for the style, and uh, asked if they could do a quick rough sketch of one of the main characters, just so I could get a feel for what they would be essentially looking like.
Mm-hmm.
And got one back. Like, they were all fantastic, but I got one back from one Louis Roldan, and my god, he had me sold immediately with the first of all, the speed that he got me this piece of Infector back to me, and just the level in detail, and the he had Infector doing the death hand all
Mm-hmm.
activated, and it looked spectacular. And he was absolutely shredded, and I was like, yes, this is the guy. um, we have toned back the shreddedness of Infector a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it was definitely that sold me on his artwork. He has been drawing for many years now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the funny thing that you mentioned earlier before we started recording was that you interview a lot of people overseas. So time
Yes.
zones are a big difficulty for you, which I
Mm-hmm.
can relate to because Lewis lives in Bolivia. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much the other side of the world.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
so I definitely feel you on that side of things. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the biggest hurdle with working with Lewis, which is a credit to how amazing he is to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And how did you collaborate? Did you speak on the phone or in like
Oh no, so
FaceTime?
with Upwork, it actually has a built-in messenger,
Okay.
almost like a private emailing
Yep.
server. So we started on that, and then just kind of shifted to using Messenger on Facebook,
Mhm.
because it was a little bit more easier for both of us to use with the chat
Yeah.
heads and
Cool.
whatnot. Instead of having to basically, so we'd get notifications instead of having to always check the
Actively look.
Upwork
Yeah.
website browser. So yeah, um, quite honestly, I actually haven't had a FaceTime interview with him yet. I don't know what he sounds like.
And I'm sure you'd be
uh,
thinking the same thing too.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure he's probably seen some of the podcasts that I've been a part of now, so he
Mhm.
knows what I sound like at least.
Oh, that's
Um,
good.
yeah. Probably should ask him whether or not he wants to do a FaceTime at some point, but um, for the 5 issues we've been working on at the moment, it's all been basically via email or
Mhm.
yeah, messenger, like instant messaging.
Yes, and I know that you probably build up a relationship, but have you had any struggles with getting information across, or sometimes you just feel like, okay, I want it to look like this, and somehow they do it a bit different, and then you have to go back to the drawing board and say, look,
Yeah.
no, this is not. How has that been for you working with Lewis?
Overall, pretty minimal.
Hmm.
It happens occasionally, and I think it could be either one of two things. Either A, and most probable, is that I'm just not good at explaining myself, and
Mhm.
two, there is a slight language barrier. But
Yeah.
Lewis is bilingual, whereas I am
Mhm.
not, which is again a bit of a shortcoming on my end. So
Mhm.
he's very patient with me, and I feel like I pester him a lot. But I feel like we have a good working relationship. He's very patient, and I think we work quite well together.
Oh, great. And I mean, yeah, I can hear that you speak very highly of him, because one thing we talk about on our show is the fact that it's very important to network. So just tell us, how important do you think networking is in the comic book community when it comes to writers, letterers, colorists?
It could be make and break. It's like most industries. It's not necessarily what you know, but who you know.
Hmm.
It could come down to you having spectacular story work, art, and you're just
Hmm.
not being seen. And if you have a few connections, you can not necessarily break through that wall, but have an easier
Hmm.
time getting over it.
Yes, exactly. And just getting over it, right? Because there's no point of having friction over a disagreement unless it's something
Yeah.
serious, right? Yeah. And you are the letterer for the book as well, so which is
Yes.
I think a very, 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 very underrated skill. So tell us about the lettering. Was this something you decided to take on yourself, or
Yeah,
did
just
you have
to
to
alleviate
study it?
stress,
Yeah.
essentially. So back when I was doing the series with a friend of mine and the previous artist, uh,
Hmm.
we didn't really know what we were doing.
Hmm.
He was doing all the illustrations. I was doing all the script writing and story concepts and whatnot. And I think it was around issue 2,
Yeah.
maybe 3. I wanted to basically take on more to alleviate and streamline the process. Um, and I figured that, hey, lettering surely can't be that hard. I was wrong, and was proceededly to self-teach myself over, I think, 7 issues now in total
Hmm.
of my own work, and I've also done some lettering for Kieran, the producer of Halftone Productions.
Hmm.
Um, Probably done about maybe 20 books now. I'm
Okay.
still
Wow.
learning,
Yeah.
still getting new tricks and stuff. And for anyone that wants to learn, I recommend this book. It's very
Okay.
good.
So let me make that bigger for you.
It's done by the guy who does, I think it's Kablam.
Well, he's looks like
Um,
nice.
yeah, Nate Pickross, and I'm probably gonna butcher that, but he
Yeah.
has a website that has a bunch of different free to use fonts for indie comics,
Okay.
and a bunch of tutorials and whatnot. Now it does uh, require you to have previous knowledge of, I think it's Illustrator, yeah, Adobe Illustrator.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily a crash course into the program, but it's a bit more of a crash course in the nitty gritty of bubble placement and
Mm.
spacing and gearing and all of those fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good on you. You took the initiative, and and you mentioned that you're still learning. I think that's a massive credit to you, because I mean, surely enough, I wouldn't be game enough to try lettering, but But I mean, your lettering. I mean, to be honest with you, I do like how sometimes you have the word bubble, then you have like a little bit of text above it, kind of
Yep.
implying what the situation is, like tap tap and blink blink or whatever those little sound effects are.
Yeah. Yeah,
You see them a
no,
lot of webtoon as well.
yes, very much so a manga and manhwa sort of staple.
Mhm.
In I'm not sure if it no, it's definitely in both. I was gonna say I'm not sure if it's in the true like the original like non-translated, but it
Yeah.
is definitely, yeah. It yeah. I think it's a bit more of a Western, no, Eastern.
Yeah, it's definitely Eastern because you sometimes see sound effects kind of like in scratched in Japanese,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
kanji characters, and then you see that, and you like for a gaijin like me, I'll just look at that and go, oh, whatever. But it probably means something in Japan, like it's a sound effect or
Yeah,
for what makes
100%.
the mood. Yeah, so and I think that's kind of fun. It just makes it different because being a comic book, reading American comics and seeing that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a bit different, but it becomes a staple now. So, yeah, I think we just need us to, gaijins need to get over it and enjoy it. Just
That's
go
it.
with the flow.
I need
Um,
to constantly rein myself in and not oversaturate with sound effects as well. So that's what
no, I
I've got to
think
be
it's
conscious
fine.
of at the moment.
No, I don't think you've got anything to worry about there. And I do like the fact that Lewis can jump into the chibi stage as well.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
it,
so
it
good.
it definitely lends itself a lot to the humor.
It
That's one of my
definitely does.
favorite scenes. I'm very proud of my Jurassic Park reference.
Nice. And do you say to him, like say to Lewis, like make this a chibi panel, or how does that work?
Um, most of, it's yeah, probably 80% of the time it's my like direction in the script with I guess it's not a written out form of storyboard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then there are other times like the face of the chibi Insanus there in the bottom left hand panel. That
Mm-hmm.
was all Lewis. So
No.
there's a bit of bit of both of us in some of them.
Yes.
Um, and he's very good at reading the tone as well. So if he decides that a chibi will look good there, he'll chuck it in and show me in the sketch, and I'll either go yay or nay depending on how I want the tone to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, honestly, 99% of the time, I pretty much let it go through. I trust his judgment.
Yes. I was gonna get into that question. So has there been anything that Lewis has done where you're like you didn't think it would work, and then he does it and you're just like blown away and you're like, yep, keep it. I mean, it could be a creation of a character, or maybe just a modification of a character of yours? Have there been anything in there that you just change and you're like, wow, okay, that worked, where you didn't think about it?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head except for the newest character that's been designed for issue 5, which is in
Okay, which you
the
need to
first the
hush,
first
right?
page. Oh no, he's in the first page of the demo, like the
Oh, okay.
the first 6 pages preview. That's the word I was
The
after.
preview, yes, on
Yeah, yeah.
Kickstarter.
Yeah. So he fully designed that character from nothing, except for a
Mhm.
kind of guidance almost. I was like, needs to be this, and this, but apart from that, go nuts, make him look as bougie as possible. Um, and initially, was going to go with I think like full afro, but I think it was more almost like cornrows. I'm
Mhm.
terrible. I need to actually look at it again to be sure. um, but the hairstyle and the outfit design that he went with really worked for what I was after. Um,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. And you mentioned before, like you introduced, like you're inspired by all these concepts and also all this manga and anime. Um, why would people why would you sorry let me try to rephrase that. For people who are looking to dive into Super Ready Battle Armor, why should they read this book
I
or these
feel
books?
it's a unique soul that I've crafted from a love of sci-fi and manga and comic elements all combined, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's being made to utilize all of the strengths of each of them to bring a really unique story about not necessarily the superpowers of these people, but the human elements, and the metaphors that the powers bring along with them. Essentially, at its core, Super Ready Battle Armor is about found family
Mm-hmm.
and coming to terms with things thrust upon you, and that could extend to a completely new being, a completely new state of life, to something as mundane as getting a new job with someone that you had admired and realizing that they may not be exactly what you had thought.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the whole message, I guess it's a very human, superhuman story.
Nice. And yeah, I can see that. And like again, I'll just harp on the fact that there are so many different characters, so many different little stories jumping from here to there. So it's very much in your face, and that's one thing I really liked about it was that it felt like you didn't have to actually know the entire backstory because that comes by panel, and
Yeah.
and that's one thing I really dug about it. Um, but I was going to ask you a question, Bradley. So, in terms of your story, Super Ready Battle Armor, um, what part of you do we find in each of your books? What part of Bradley Adan do we actually find in all your books?
Um, like I mentioned before, a big part of this is me working through a lot of my trauma as a creative expression
Mm-hmm.
in the medium that I'm just insanely passionate about,
Yeah.
to the point of like I'm reading like nearly 30 different manga at the moment that are ongoing, as well as a podcast about manga as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it's pretty much everything, um, of my early years, my thoughts about how important life is
Mm-hmm.
because of the importance of death. They're an intertwined unity, and that's, I don't know. I guess my mentality, like, can't thought at the moment. I think at the end of the day, what you're getting is a retrospective look at where my head was at while I was going through a lot of very hard times. But
Mm-hmm.
I obviously don't want to just vomit that out onto a page. So you're getting it kind of cut up and sensationalized. So Infector is probably the biggest foil to myself. He goes
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of what I went through early on, but BA is the optimistic side of me,
Mm-hmm.
which sees the best parts of any given situation. Um, Insanus and Violet are both the creative, sci-fi loving nerd part of me that just loves to indulge in anything remotely related to time travel, lasers, robots, like just absolutely obsessed with that sort of stuff. And the villains are essentially, they're not good people, but there's aspects of their lives that have brought them to this point, which
that's good.
It's not necessarily they're evil, it's the surroundings that have led them down this path and their upbringing, and it's the side of society that I don't like,
Yeah.
that I think needs to change. And I feel like the villain is the perfect vessel for that sort of animosity and pessimistic optimism. Basically, like the mentality of like people like Fisk, where it's controlled by force, like you have with the second in command of the main gang in Super RBA. He's very much so that unification by any means, and force will and fear will rule. But then the head of that gang is very much so about wanting peace for everybody, but is willing to step on people to get to that peace, even if that means he can't enjoy it himself. So there's a lot of extreme views on how I think certain things need to be changed or brought down, which is where the villains come into it. I think that kind of covers most of the characters.
Yeah, and I think you're right that you need that. Even though you got the antagonist is not always bad people. Not everyone just grows up and decides I want to go and be a serial killer. There's things out there that cause that social angst, whether it be poverty,
environmental,
the environment, the politics, and I think you really nailed it. That I didn't see any bad people in this book. It's just
not
circumstances caused it. Yeah, well, not yet. Okay, so we're leading into that. Well, I appreciate that because now gives us more of a reason to read it. But in terms of yourself, so what music do you listen to?
I a bit of a mixed bag.
Okay.
What I've currently been listening to is a mix between Bring Me the Horizon, Outcast, Electric Blue Orchestra,
Wow.
and Daft Punk,
Nice.
with a couple of other random sort of songs thrown in here and there, and some Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance.
Nice.
Mostly punk, emo, metal, but then we got some other stuff in there to kind of lighten the mood a bit.
Yeah, and do you listen to music while you're in the creative process?
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
I've noticed that I can't focus otherwise. I've got inattentive ADHD that can't be medicated because of my heart condition. So I've got to work around certain things to kind of trick myself into staying motivated, which blasting music is unfortunately one of the only ways that I can sit down and focus on a script. But then if a banger comes on, then I just get distracted from that very quickly.
Yeah, I know, right? You'd have to listen, take the time and listen to it, and like, oh, where was I again? Okay,
yeah, pretty much just like, yes,
yeah,
right.
There, where was I?
Yeah, pretty much. What year is it?
So you've got 1 to 5 coming out on Kickstarter. When will we be able to see or hear of issue number 6?
That's a good question. Don't have any solid plans just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we're looking probably, depending on how this Kickstarter goes,
Yep.
probably towards the end of this year,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't really that far away.
Sure isn't.
Like, I can't believe we're already almost halfway through May.
I know, right? Isn't that crazy?
Crazy.
Before we know it, it'll be Christmas.
I
What a scary thought. Okay, so what do you hope to achieve with this Kickstarter?
know. In terms of just essentially, I would like to alleviate the financial burden from myself
Mm-hmm.
and build more of an audience. Those are my two main goals with coming to Kickstarter at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we're looking for about 2.5 grand, and that will be
Mm-hmm.
to cover paying Lewis, getting it printed, and getting it shipped out to you. We've pretty much calculated it down to the dollar almost, um,
Mm-hmm.
with the postage fluctuating all the time.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hard, but want to try and make it as affordable for people as possible. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one physical issue of the comic is about $8, um, and then you're looking at postage on top of that, so you're probably looking at about $16.
Yeah. Which I think is fair. I
Yeah.
mean, postage is one thing. You can't control the how much it costs to mail something out. But do you have like PDF versions that people
Yes,
overseas can get their
absolutely.
eyes on?
Yep. So we've got the digital collection as well. We've also got a collection of our other comics on the Halftone Production label.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you can splurge a bit more and get, I think it's up to 15 different comics.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a collection of so all 5 issues, or all current 5 issues of SRBA,
Mm-hmm.
and the 6 issues of In Purgatory, which is done by Kieran,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's also the Talking Bread anthology series, which was a really fun thing to work on. So there's a story from myself in there, as well as I think it's like 10 other Aussie creators.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. So
And
there's
how did
there's a
you
lot. Sorry.
no, you go on.
Yeah, just gonna say that. So there's a lot there on offer, as well as the comics. We've also got stickers and pins.
Fantastic. So the question I was going to ask before we wrap up is, how did you get it? How did you get acquainted with Kieran at Halftone Productions?
So he's also in my area. So he lives on the
Oh,
other side of the
okay.
border in Wodonga, and he
Mm-hmm.
actually worked at JB Hi-Fi with my partner. So it
Mm-hmm.
was, again, not what you know, but who you know.
Exactly.
And yeah, he started doing his halftone effect uh, podcast
Mm-hmm.
about the same time. No, just before I actually got into going into production of comics myself.
Mm.
So he was the push that I needed to get the ball rolling, and yeah, it all happened very quick. Did a couple of
Mm.
podcasts with him, and then we were pretty much at Supernova within 12 months.
And was that Supernova in Sydney?
No, in Melbourne.
In Melbourne.
Uh,
Okay, nice.
I have family down there, so it was a bit easier with
No, for
accommodation
sure.
and whatnot.
No, easy way for you to travel.
That's
Well,
it.
I'm gonna. Yeah, so it's been great meeting you, Bradley, and thank you for joining us today on Thinking the Extra. Don't forget to click
Thanks.
like and subscribe to get more from Comic Crusaders. But before I let you go, Brad, where else can we find you?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me.
No
But you
worries.
can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube, the Halftone
Mm-hmm.
Productions, as well as my individual one, which will be Bradley Adan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, got the YouTube uh, podcast as well. And yeah, Halftone Productions. If you search us, you'll find us.
We certainly will. That's halftoneproductions.com.au.
That's it.
Well, thank you, Bradley. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, check out our next episode of Think Indie Extra. Check us out at comiccrusaders.com. And until then, see you next time. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. My alarm was going off in the background. I don't normally record at night. Yeah.